Okay, and let me share my screen. Entire screen. Can you see my screen? Can you? Anyone? Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So today is a big day. So before with Node, we started with file system and how to store your data in inside file, or how you can you have exercises, and we were speaking about how to create files, how to delete files, how to store data there, parse there from files, etc. And like with Node and with Express, we had only one exercise with HTTP, only because nobody's using HTTP in production and everybody's using Express. So that is why we had one exercise just to show you that here how you will work with HTTP and how painful it is, because you need manually like get data, manipulate with it to format it, etc. It's very painful. And after that, we have exercises with Express, and from now on, we will, for all our servers, we will use Express. And so we're working with files, and the biggest problem to storing data in files is efficiency, basically. So the story is that you might notice that if you don't have a file, right? You send in some data from the front end, and you're receiving this on a back end. You're creating the file, you're storing it there, and then if you want to add, let's say you created a file users, like huge JSON file, right, where you will store all your users, and you send in data, your new user, you store in users. Then when you want to add a new user, you send in data again, you open your file. So you need to read your file, parse your JSON file from there, and you'll convert everything into the object. Then you add into the array, basically. Then you push your new user there, and then you stringify it and send it back to the file. And it's fine and quickly when you have one or two users, but when you get to the point that you have millions of them, it's it just you will kill your server because of that, because you moving a lot of data, parsing, modifying, put it back to the file. So that is why people start using databases. And we have quite a few types, and today we will talk about relational databases, and particularly about MySQL, because MySQL is the most popular relational database. Some people still use some Postgres, etc., but the most popular is MySQL. And SQL is a separate language, so we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So yeah, database base can store lots of data, and you can retrieve just particular things from the data. You don't need to parse all your data from the database to modify it as we have with files. And you need to, if you need one record, you can get this record and modify it and put it back, or just directly modify your record. So you basically send in query to update particular record, and you don't need to basically parse it, modify it, and store it back. So we in there with relational databases, we have tables, columns, and rows. So the top level is a database itself. Then we have tables in it. Inside each table we have columns. This is kind of the how model works and how schema works. So it's like you have columns. It's kind of like an Excel, right? So if you go to Google Sheets, give me a second. So yeah, I don't know. Probably wrong one. But yeah, this one will work. Yeah, let me just show you. So we have columns, right? And we have rows. So rows, basically your records, and columns defining the table. So this is pretty much the same for relational database and for MySQL particularly, because it's very easy to manipulate data and get records separately. That is why like we normally use we use databases to store data. And the story is again here that we will briefly talk about MySQL, and for the rest of the module we will talk about Mongo. And this is because the default stack, you might heard about MERN, which is Mongo, Express, React, and Node. So that this is like a very, very popular stack for full stack developer and for any platform. It's not the only one, but it is very popular. So that is why we will focus on Mongo for the rest of exercises. But today we want to talk about relational databases and about how to work with them. Yeah, so here we have relational databases using SQL and document using an adapter, and one of these adapters is MongoDB. So yeah, and today we are talking about SQL. So relationship defines structure, and what it means I'll explain in a few seconds. So we have here Sam created this one, but this is about your records. So I'll probably skip this, and this is the regular table. So you have ID, you have content, for example, and you have user ID, the author who created this content. And for relationships, we have three types of relationships. We have one-to-one, we have one-to-many, and many-to-many. Did anyone hear about that? About any of these relationships? No? Okay. So, what one-to-one means? That means that you creating two records in different tables has one-to-one relationship. So imagine that you have student dormitory, student's hotel or whatever, and you have, like, in each room you can have only one student, and one student can have only one room. This is how one-to-one works. So one student have one room, and one room belongs to one student. This is one-to-one relationship. And here is an example. So you have one table where you have ID and the full name, and we have another table where we have like room number, so ID, room number, size, and student ID of the student that owns this room and uses this room, right? So you have you just put in here, so you can find basically this the owner of this room by the student ID. So it has some relationship, and this is one-to-one relationship. Any questions? No? Okay. So the next stop, so we have one-to-one. We have one-to-many. That means that we can have a lot of records that belongs to one user in our case, but to others, to one thing. And this is a more complicated example. So you can have comments, and you can have posts, and you can have not just one comment, you can have a lot of comments that belongs to user. And the same with posts. You can have a lot of posts that belongs to user. But you can have only one author, one user that created this some post or comment, right? So you can't the post or the comment can't have a lot of authors or like a lot of users that created it. So only one person can create the post. So you can have one user can have a lot of posts. So this is many, but one post can have only one user, the author. So this is one to many. And here, this is a simple example. So you can have user and comments. So one user created one comment, right? The user ID is one. And the same user created the second one, the second comment. Also user ID is one, but another user have one comment, left one comment. And it's not, so for the second user, it's not one-to-one because it is this user able to have a lot of comments. So it's still one-to-many. This is like a concept. Can something have a lot of other things? If yes, then this is many. If no, then this is one. Does it make sense? Yes? No?
Yes. So it's like if we have, I think comments also have its own ID.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So each record in the table has ID.
Yeah.
And you create in a separate column on your table as a reference to whatever you want, right? You can have, I don't know, student. It can be name. It can be like if you create a furniture table or room, and you have rooms, and you have furniture, and you can have here like number, like room number, right, or room ID, and you referencing to other table.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Can you please give us another example apart from this one?
Yeah, I mean, so I have slightly more complicated one, but so this is the comments and posts, right? So you have one, again, the another example can be these rooms and furniture. So in one room, you have a lot of furniture, right? So one room here, for example, and you have a lot of furniture, a list with room ID. But the furniture can have only one room because it can't be in both rooms. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And the last thing is many to many. So in my case, it always depends. It's not the like absolute thing. It's about the how you creating your database. You will define these relationships. It means that you need to think that I have authors and I have books, right? For example, and you in your database you will model it in the way that only one author can have one book, and one book can have only one author, or you can model that many authors can be for one book. If one book can have a lot of authors, and one author can have a lot of books. And the same with this, probably the better example is for one-to-one, because in my model, this is how I designed my database. For in other database, in other instance, I can have a few students in one room, right? So it will be many one-to-many, because I will have room that can have 3 students in it. But so you need to understand that it's not like some absolute things. It's about how you designing and what you're expecting to store in this database, and what kind of relationship you want to have for each table. So it's not just hard because one student can have one room. It's not about that. It's about that how you design it. And you might think, okay, I want to have one student for one room, and one room can have one student, so this is one-to-one. So go back to our many-to-many. Here's an example. And you have authors, right? And you have books. And this is a problem. So to match them, you need to create the third table that will match them in both directions, right? Because one book, for example, can have a few co-authors, and one author can have a lot of books. So that is why you creating like a middleware, like middleman, that will match them. That kind of table, separate table with author ID and book ID, and you just build basically the whole table is about just two IDs to match them. And with this third table, you can actually get all authors by book ID, or all books by author ID. And you can do it with SQL language. So this is how it's designed. Questions on this one?
So this relationship is between the user and what
authors and books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So for each table, on each table, when you're creating your columns, you want to have primary key. And by default, this is ID, right? So the primary key is a special, here are the quotes basically, a special relational database table column designed to uniquely identify each table record. So it should be unique and it can't be nullable. So you can't have null there. So go back to our tables here. That means that I can define, I can pick any column as a primary key column. That means that, for example, if I pick ID, by default it's always ID, but you can change it. And if I pick ID, I can't repeat and have the same ID in this column. But if I pick, for example, full name, that means that I can't have two authors with the same full name. So again, this is about design, how you building your and modeling and thinking about, okay, how do I want to like create my database? And you need to think about what column should be a primary key, should contain primary key. So and again, when you're creating, by default it's always ID, but you can redefine it, you can change it. Okay, so the next step I already mentioned a few times, but this is SQL. So SQL is a language, is a specific language, and I will this is the way how you query your data from the database. And I have a good link where you can check a lot of queries, a lot of what each keyword means, like create, alter, drop, insert, update, delete, grant, quotes, etc. So here you basically have a lot of examples how to create a lot of examples of queries that you can use, but you can create your own, because this is like a language. So you write your query by your own, and you need to think like, okay, I want to, for example, this is create table, and you can create table like with be some name, etc. If you want to add some data, you can insert into table name, then columns, and then values. So this pink color is because this is reserved words. This is like commands in SQL, and so you have values, and then you pass in your values, and that will create a record in your database. And I want to show you actually that how we do it. Yeah, so we have, this is a like MySQL setup, and why I'm talking about that now, because I want to show you examples. And to do that, to start using your MySQL, you need to install MySQL. Here we have link, so you can go there and download your MySQL. So you can select your operation system and just download it and install. Then when you install, for example, for Mac, preferences, if I go, you will get a new icon, which is MySQL. And if I open it, and it will show you that I'm actually running the server. So it's green, and I'm running this particular server. Here you have some configuration, but I haven't changed it. It's just a default configuration. And you can stop the server. It asks me, and that will stop the server, right? And I can start the server. And I'm starting the server. Yep. So yeah, why I'm showing that now. Next thing, to start using it, so you have MySQL on your computer, and to start querying your data, to start creating your records, you can do that through the terminal and write commands. To be honest, I need to remember the command. I believe somewhere, yeah, something like that. So you have MySQL, then root, and then you have a password. So about this is a username, and this is a password that you will provide a password. But where it comes from, when you install in your MySQL, it will ask you to provide a username and the password. So then when you run your command in terminal, you need to provide the password, right, wrong one. Root. And now I'm in MySQL. And yeah, so we can have run help to have some commands, but normally you just need to write queries, and I think this show database.
The user and password is created when you're installing the
Yeah,
SQL.
yes, exactly. Databases, is it? Yeah. So another point, because you might ask that me for like 99% that you will ask. See that when I try to run this command, show database, it showed me the next line, because every single query for SQL is supposed to end with semicolon. So that means that when I run my command, I need to put the semicolon in the end of the query. So hit enter, and now I have my database, right? To be honest, I need to, is it open?
So if you don't give the semicolon, what will happen?
Yeah, so if I don't add the semicolon, it will just put like another line. So I'm continue to write my query.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but I mean, you will never use this because this is just silly. Because we have a nice UI for that, and that is why we have Table Plus. This is a free application. They have some pro version, but free is enough for us. And what it does, it basically, so because I'm running, so let me just delete this from here, just to show you from the very beginning. So you open this table, right? This application, and you remember that we are running my server, right? So I want to new connection, right? And that will ask me what kind of connection I want to have, and I want to have MySQL connection. So create name, I don't know, local host. This is just for my new server, what I want to have here. And host is default. So user, again, this is what we provide when we install the database, the MySQL, sorry. So root, and my super secured password is root. And here I can test. So see, it shows that it is okay, so everything is green. If I provide the wrong password, hit test, I have an error, right? So test, everything is green, connect, and I'm in my database, I'm connected to the database. So now, if I open here, open database, I've created database already. So you can create a new database by clicking plus, and you can do the same from terminal, but it's much nicer to work with UI, especially for front-end developers. We are very scared of backend. So you just create, I'm just joining my table, my database. Let me just delete, and I don't have tables here, right? I just deleted 2 tables. And again, you can do everything with commands, but you can just right click and new table, and let's create users. And see that primary, by default, it says ID, right? And here you have structure tab. It's confusing, it's a bit confusing, but you'll rewatch this video later. So we have structure, and we're creating like columns. So the first column should be ID. The type of this column should be integer. Is it nullable? No, because the primary column can't be nullable, so no. And default, we can use auto increment. So every time you create a record, you don't need to think about ID, record ID. Just don't think about that. And when you create a user, you just pass in like first name, last name, maybe age, whatever you pass, but you don't need to pass the ID. You just pass, you have auto increment, so every time you add a new record, it will auto increment and create another ID for your record. So we have ID column, great. We probably want to have another column. So this is position in the table, and I'll show you what it means in a second. But let's say first name, wrong place. So first name. Here that should be varchar. So we have 2 options. We have text and we have varchar. So varchar means that you have some short text, and that allocates less memory for it. I mean, we can memory is about low-level programming, but you need to remember that it takes less space when you use varchar. So nullable, yes, it can be nullable. Sorry. Yes, and by default it's null. So we have the second column. It doesn't look like a column, but this is like a structure that you define it. I'll show you how we can see the columns, all these 2 columns. So see that I have like a green background. This is because I just created, but I haven't saved it. So when I press Command S, now it created my schema with 2 columns. And now if I jump to data, I have my 2 columns, right? ID and the first name. If I want to add more columns, I'm going to structure and creating more columns. So 3, last name, same here, varchar, nullable, wait a second, So we have is nullable, yes. Column default, null, and this is it. And another one, let's create age. So for age is integer, so int can be null, yes, and default is null, right? Okay, so now if I again to green, so I need to save it, and as you can see here below, it executing actually SQL commands. So what you're doing here behind the scene is actually executing commands for you. So you're adding our stuff. So if you go back to data now, we have 4 columns, right? ID, first name, age, and last name. So the problem here is that the order is different. And this is what I said about this number. So this is a position in the order. It means nothing. It's just for readability of your database. So age should be 4, and this one should be 3. So I want to have ID, first name, last name, and then age. So save, go back, and my age now is the last one, right? So we have tables and we have users. So let me just close this one. So to create a new item, you can just, to mock your data, all you need to do is, again, you just click here. Let's start with 1. Last name, I don't know, John Smith, age, I don't know, 25. And you just created a new record. You can create another one, and you can do, I don't know, sale, 31, almost that. Yeah, so I have 2 records. Again, green background means that I haven't saved. Command S, I've saved it, right? So now I have a database, and I can search for my items by querying it. And what I can do, let me just, I can create a new query. For some reason, sending me to the new, give me a second. I definitely can discard.
Sorry, but can you please make it a little bit bigger? Zoom out.
Let me try. Sorry. I can't do that. It doesn't work like that. Sorry.
Right, it's okay.
So let me just query SQL. Yeah. So I can write like select, right? Select. It just because I'm remember this, but I normally Google for queries. Select user everything from users. This is my table, right? It's highlighting. Yeah, this is it. And semicolon. Run current, and I have 2 records, right? Or I can have users, just first name and age, or last name and age. So users, last name, comma, users, age from users. Run, and I have just 2 columns. So I can query and tailor my requests by these queries, right? Or I can add where users age equals 25, for example. Run, and I have just 1 record, right? So I can tailor it. It's very flexible. You don't need to get everything and manipulate data to find this. You can just write the particular query, and that can be flexible. And when you're creating your API and endpoints, you might have pass age as a param, right? So you can query users, all users with age, and you pass in this as a query param, and you just using and have this dynamic query. and you'll sort your users, filter users and get them to your backend, and you can set it to the server, and you can send it to the front end. Does it make sense? Looks like not. So that is why I will add it to the exercises, to the very first exercise for today's lesson. I've added a MySQL cheat sheet, and here you have some queries, how to build them. So select, right? This is what I did, and you have conditions, join, and we will talk about join today as well, and a lot of things, how to delete, update, create, a lot of things. This is like a basic list of MySQL queries. So I've added this link to the exercise so you can find it there. And I do not expect you that you will memorize it, because if you're not working as a backend developer on daily basis and writing your queries every day, you'll never memorize all of them. Never. Yep. So, and the last bit, to use your MySQL in your when you build in the server, you need to install MySQL package from npm. Yeah. So let's actually go to the code editor, and let's create some endpoints with Express. So let me remove this, close, and yeah. Let me just create here. Awesome. Okay, so I want to npm init -y. So what do I need to have here? I want to have an index file, index.js, beautiful. So as I said, we want to install MySQL package. If you go here, we have MySQL package. Remember that we already have on my machine, I have my MySQL, and I have the package. So installation, right? Go back here, installed. So now I can import it. MySQL, require MySQL. Great, almost done. Server almost ready. So for now, I'm not creating Express server. We will get to that today, but for now, I'm just creating like a node daemon. I want to run node daemon here, index. So I'm listening for MySQL, and I want to build the connection to MySQL. And actually, let's go to their docs. How to set up. Very, very simple. So you're creating the connection, right? So you need to connect to your database. Remember that MySQL is running on my machine. That I've showed you here in my preferences, right? So we are running it. That is why I'm able to connect. Let's just to show you that if I stop the server, go to my app here, you already see that I'm failing, right? Can't connect to my SQL server because I've stopped it. So my application already saying that something is wrong. And if I do this, I will write my code to connect to database, I will get the same error because my server is not running. So I need to start my server. And now try again. Yes, successfully connected. So let's go. Let me move this so we will scroll less. This is the basic setup. So what I need is, so localhost is what we have, localhost. User, we have root. Remember that my user is root. Your user might be different, depends what you will call it. And the password, my secure password, root. And database, in my case, actually I have my database right here. So my database is actually my database. But we can create another database. We can create with different name and use this name here. So we kind of create a connection, but we need to finally connect it. So we created like an instance, but we want to connect to it, and then we can query. And after we query, we want to end connection. So let me actually try to do this. Let's just copy paste their code. But I want to select everything. Remember what I did there? Everything from users, right? Users. So I'm taking all records from users, and results we have, let's console log results. So if I save, I have my results, right? If I, let me just check it, what do they have? Sorry. Why you're showing it? Yeah, beautiful. Okay, sorry, right? So you're getting this, and it's not raw data. So we need to read their documentation because it shows some. This is like a model of MySQL. So I bet that we can pass some param to get raw data. So query post functions row. Query. Let me just check. So is it raw? Maybe it's raw. Maybe not. No. Let me just look, because we need to have not the instance, but a custom format, get insert row. Let me just Google quickly. So we have MySQL row data node. Some quick solution. In construction, create an object. It looks like this. You can check the access of name. That's odd. Because let me check for each values parse stringify. Yeah, this is a hack. This is not how you want to do, because when you're stringifying, you're losing this reference to model and then parsing. So this is a hack. Let me just, there should be a syntax. Ooh. That might be a valid one actually. They should have some param. So again, when you're working with just pure MySQL, you have some kind of, you need to do some extra job to resolve it. Let me just find some. Yeah, I don't like this solution. This is ugly solution. One more second. What it does, response. What's going on? Okay, stringify, parse. I mean, I can loop through it and build my own object, of course. They saying that it's weird that I definitely should be able to pass some extra param row. And what I'm getting? I'm getting rocket. I bet this is should be should it be something like query? I'm just guessing. No, it won't work like that. Okay, yeah, so their solution is just to JSON stringify, and then you want to parse it back. So JSON parse, save, and now you're getting just an object, right? Which is ugly, but this is what we have. Yeah.
So, sorry, what was that we're trying to do?
So because we have a query and we're getting like MySQL model, I'll show you here and basically show you the difference. So the difference is that we have a model for each object, for each record, MySQL model. So we're still able to get all the values, but we keep this kind of reference to the model. To remove it and have like regular objects, we need to get raw data without these object references to the MySQL.
So you wanted to convert it to the object?
Yeah. Not like this, but like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll show you what, how you normally will work with MySQL, and you'll never have this problem there because they have like a param to have a raw data. But for some reason they don't have it here, or maybe I'm just missing. Typecast, long char. Yeah, we probably don't. Introduction, let me just check. Connection, create connection. Password return. Yeah, anyway, forget about that. Okay. Yeah, so now, as you can see, we can query, right? And we can do the same, like select users, I don't know, last name, and users age, right? From users. So if I save, I'm getting only first name and last and age. So I'm not, I don't have the first name and ID. So I can tailor my queries, and I can store this data and have it here. And basically I can send it to my user, to the front end with Express, right? So another thing, that every time you want to make a query, you're doing connect, and basically you have create connection, and you need to connect, query, and end. But MySQL gives you, this package gives you like pool, and you creating a pool, so you don't need to write your connect, query, and end every time. You just have create pool. You can have creation connection limit. So we replace this. We have connection limit, and we have like let's say 10 as they have. So now I don't need to have connect, I don't need to have end, and it is working, right? So now I can just use these queries to have as many times as I want without this stop, connect, and end. So if you go back again to the very top, it's much easier to work with. I don't need to have this and I don't need to have that because the pool will handle it for me, right?
So that connection 10 means what? Like connection disconnect or after 10 seconds or what? 10
No, the limit means that I can have 10 queries on the same time. So I'll show you connection limit. The maximum number of connections to create at once. This is what I'm saying. So you can have only 10 connections. You can increase it to like 100 or something. Because every time when you create connection, you need to connect and end. So every time you end the connection, you basically you closing the connection, right? Theoretically, sorry.
I don't quite understand. We one user can have one connection, right, for one PC.
No, means that you querying. I'll show you 2. Let's have limit of 2.
Probably the question is, why do we need connection and why we need to do the end connection? What's the point of all this?
So you mean for the just for create connection for this one? So the point here, when you have when you use create connection model, you need to connect. You need to run connect before you run query to the database.
So basically you're connecting MySQL to the node, yeah?
So node to MySQL.
Node to SQL, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, probably there is no difference, but yeah. And when you finish with your query, you want to end this connection.
So every time I make a query and then I need to end the connection.
Yeah, so you establishing connection. Yeah.
So if I want to make another query, I have to write connection.connect, then I make a query and then connection.end.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can use create pool and avoid this. Because create pool will handle automatically open and close for you. Connect and close and end for you. It will automatically handle.
I see. So let's say we need a one query and we have done it, and we are going to do another work the node in the node, and when we go back to the SQL, do we have to write all those lines again for another query?
I mean, you can create a function, right, and reuse it.
I see.
Query name, I don't know. Query last name and age, right? And you just put in that inside. And you just call in this function. And you might have like return or resolve. You can actually you can convert it to promise and have resolve and basically return up to the so you can assign, when you call this one, you can assign to the variable. So you can create like a new promise, you have resolve reject, and here you have your, let's say, data, and you just resolving resolve data, resolve with data. So this is async. Here we want to return a new promise, right? So now if I have like const test, because we need to have a function, so we can have like const I don't know, data. We have our function, sorry, await our function. So this is async console log data, right? So we can reuse it. And if we go here, save, we still have it, right? And we can reuse it, these queries. Because if I don't wrap it into promise, I can't return anything because I'm inside another function, another callback function. So if I have return here, I can't actually pass it outside this function. That is why I'm wrapping into promise, resolving, and here I'm catching it. Does it make, I mean, it's not, it probably doesn't make sense. What questions do you have about that?
And another thing is the data that you have created in your database, that has to be converted back to the object so you can read into the node, yeah?
Yes, yeah, because when you're querying, you technically get in the object, but it is modeled, so I can theoretically, I can have something like without this parsing, all of that. Let me just comment it out and have results. Let's say just for the first thing, 0 and let's say age. Save, 25. So it is an object, but it has this reference to the model, and if you want to get rid of it, you can rebuild the object. You can have like a constructor that will loop through everything and rebuild it, or you can have something, I don't know, probably like const data equals, maybe it's better, result dot map, have item, right? Without doing anything, you just looping through it, but you losing this reference. Oh no, you still have the reference. Okay, beautiful. You can have something probably then that's right, yeah, to lose the reference to the model, to the MySQL model. So see that I'm losing this raw data rocket packet, sorry. Yeah, so I don't need to do my parse and stringify, just looping through it and rebuilding the array of objects.
So with the structure of raw data packet, what basically you're saying, you can't read that into the node. You have to convert it into the object.
No, you can, but it's for, I don't know, it makes me crazy to have it. I want to have a nice array of objects.
Oh, I see. It's just a raw data packet name that you like it.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so it is working, right? So we can query database. Let's actually create another one to insert some data, right? Const push to DB, right? DB. And let's push user, which would be an object. And what I want to do is again return new promise, resolve, reject. And here I have another connection dot query, and I'm writing my, see, this too smart, right? Insert into users. This is my table. Then I have first name, last name, and age, right? Because I don't need to specify ID. And here I have values, and that should be comma separated, right? So what I can do, so my user is an object, and what I can do is const stringify, right? Stringify and my user. That should be fine, I think. Should it be? Maybe not. I probably need to, yeah, definitely not. So this one, we want to just have a list of values, like, so like I want to have something like Smith, John Smith and 26, right? This is what I want to have. So all I need to do is to use object. Remember JavaScript, this is not Node, it's just JavaScript. Values user dot join, right? Like that. So let's actually test it. Stringify. Commented out this one. Do you understand what I'm doing here?
No, could you please explain line by line?
Yep, yeah, sure. So let me just, we finish with our test with reading for now. No, that should be. So here I will call my function push to DB with the user, right? And I will have first name Sam, last name Smith, and age 28, right? So I'm passing an object inside my function. Yep. So here I'm taking my object, and this is just JavaScript method to take all values as an array of an object. So if I'll show you in here. Let me just zoom in. So if I have object dot values and pass my object, right? I have an array of values. Sam Smith 28.
Yeah.
If I can have the same with keys. First name, last name, age. So now, because I have an array, I want to join, because I want to convert it to string, and I want to join with comma space, right? So now I have Sam Smith 28. And this is what my value actually expecting. So values here, expecting just a string.
Cool. And where the user is the name of the database file, right?
User is just what I'm passing, because imagine that you receiving some data from the front end, and this is a user, right? You have a post method from the front end, you get in a user, and you want to basically get this data and store it into the database. Right? We will get to we will build today an Express server, so you'll see what I mean.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, so for now we querying, and then we want to have our function, callback function. So comma results, and theoretically we have like if error, return error, yeah, basically reject error, else we just resolve with result. I think this is it. So now we can actually, so we are calling this function, and let me just show you. We want to call this function and assign the result, or we can just call this function, doesn't matter. We will call this function and we will get our new user in our database here, right? So let me, when I save, I get an error. Beautiful. Unknown column Sam in field list. Sorry. So let's check what I done wrong. This is what we have, right? Have a list of values. Right, we want to have, quotes. We want to have quotes for each value. We want to have quotes. Let me check their docs. So we can build with quotes. Okay, sorry, this is CO. Cert. Let me check. So how do they, okay. So they just pass in an object, right? So they have it, they like their documentation says that we can pass as a separate thing. So let's actually do that. So we have insert into users. We have set question mark, and this is it. And here we just put in our object. This is from their docs. So we don't need to stringify even that. Save. I think we saved. Yep, we got it, right? So if I remove, again, I got a red background. That means that I haven't saved. When I save, I don't have it. So if I save it again, refresh my database, I'm getting my new record. Yep. So it will will take your key, object key, as a column key, and the value as a value. Yep. Or no?
Yeah, did it like change the ID? I think first was the third when you deleted and now it's given 4.
Yeah, because this is auto increment, remember?
I see, so it's just increasing.
Yeah, database actually track the ID if you set to auto increment. Yeah.
Cool.
So nothing crazy, right? So you have just you can get your data, you can post your data, and this is pretty much it with MySQL querying. So yeah, sorry. The next thing, it is an ORM, which is object relational mapping, and this is like an extra tool to make your like process of storing data much nicer. Why I'm saying that? Because we have a lot of different database, right? Like Postgres, formats like Postgres, SQL. We have quite a few more, and this one, yes. So here we have MariaDB, SQLite, etc. But this one basically creates the generic API for all of them. You're just doing basic setup, and you can easily switch between databases very easily, because you have generic styling of querying databases. And if you change, let's say you're using MySQL and on some point you decided to move to Postgres, all you need to do is change your setup for database. You don't need to change all your queries. You don't need to change and restructure them, etc. Just a few lines of code needs to be updated. So let's actually let me show you. So here's from their official website, and we will actually do another coding here. So SQLize, this one. Here's the website. So we need to install it and then go to documentation. Let me install that. So stop the server, install SQLize. Yeah, so now I can do my const. So let's go to documentation, because I need to explain what I'm doing. So here they have like a getting started. So you need to install, and what I'm saying is that with their SQLize, you can query different types of databases, right? So SQLite, Postgres, you can reach them by URI. You can use for SQLite, you can use just by passing object with params. Or in our case, we use MySQL, and what you're doing, this is what we need for our setup. So you initializing your SQLize, provide the database name, then a username and the password, then host and dialect, which basically in our case is MySQL, but it can be MariaDB, Postgres, or MS SQL, which is Microsoft SQL. So let's actually copy that here, and we need to import it, right? Const SQLize requires SQLize. So this is it. I don't need this one anymore because I'm using my adapter, this SQLize. And yeah, so this is it. Let me just remove all of that. We don't need it. And in my case, I want to have MySQL. Here it's MyDB. Remember that my database is MyDB. Root and root. Yeah. So I have a SQLize, right? This is the first step. They also suggesting you to have like a console log. Remember that if you already worked with Express on previous exercises, we have like listen and a callback to console log that we are actually listening. We are listening the port. So here they have pretty much the same. So they have try and catch, but we need to have a function because this is asynchronous as well. So I know start. Try and catch, that should be async. And I want to call my start function, right? So we can see, we will see that it is actually actually working. And we have an error, and the error is please install MySQL 2 package. So npm install MySQL 2, and they actually mention in that, they mention in here that if you're working with MySQL, you need to do this. Great, let's start again. Yeah, looks like it is working, right? Connection has been established successfully. Again, if I go and stop my server, probably wrong one, stop my server, I failed this one, and yeah, I have the error, right? It's refused to connect. So start it again. I feel now that you'll get to the point when on your machine you'll run a lot of local servers for front end, for back end, for the MySQL, that it will just kill your machine. That's funny, but yeah. So save. Yeah, it is working again. Beautiful. So let's try actually to query the database. Before you start, you can do queries with SQLize. You need to actually initialize the model of your table. That means that you need to tell SQLize what is the structure of your table to mention all your columns. So if you go to model basics, this is how you define your table, right? So let me just copy paste it and explain every single bit. So we have a user, right? We have a table users, and if you initialize user with lowercase, that means that you have table users. So it will pluralize. So basically you're creating like a structure for one user, but it will pluralize it automatically for you and look for this table users. So in our case, all we need to do is to have data types, and as you can see, we don't have data types. This is because we need to export it from SQLize. And same here, because I don't have any other parameters, I don't need to pass to have it as an object. I can just do it straight away. And another bit is age, right? So that should be data types integer. So this is what we have. So we have an instance of user. And yeah, let's forget about this for a second. So we established the connection, we have an instance of user, and now I can actually create the first query. So if I go to query basics, I'm showing all of that because you'll do the same. You need to go through documentation and read what do they have before when you creating your things. And here to create a user, right? Remember we wrote the query, so insert to users, etc. All you need to do is this. Just user create first name, last name. In our case, that will be age, and this is it. And you'll create a new record. So let's actually test it. So we have start, and if it's authenticated, I want to inject you, or like add user, let's say. This is async. Sorry. And in our case, we just have async user and cut. And here I will call my add user with user first name, last name, and age. I mean, for me, it looks simpler. What do you think? Is it MySQL version is better, or the version of SQLize is simpler? What do you prefer?
I think SQL is less code and more simpler program.
Yeah, so basically you think less about SQL language. You just write in your JavaScript style things. So that it for, again, because MySQL is another language that you need to learn, and if you're not a very hard kind of, I don't know, the geek of backend and databases, you probably don't need to know it. So you prefer, and everybody's preferring to use some adapters like SQLize. So you don't need to think about this syntax, SQL syntax. Okay, so you see that we are getting an error here. And this is because it's saying that I try to inject, so it runs the query, insert into SQL query, users, ID, first name, last name, age, and it has created add and updated it, which I'm not actually passing it, right? So I haven't specified it. And this is like, you need to pay attention to this moment, because this is what comes from SQLize by default. If you go to model basics, they have timestamps, and you need to turn it off. By default, it is on, so you have created it and updated it. You just need to when you define in your table the user model or whatever other table, you need to add another param, timestamps false. So if I have these two columns, created at and updated at here, that will work without any problems. But in our case, maybe you need it, but in our case we don't need it, so we pass in a second parameter. The second parameter, the third parameter. The first one is the record name, so the table basically, if pluralized. Then you have the schema. Then you have that you want to disable, you pass in some options, and one of them is timestamps false. So now, looks like I just inserted something. Let's refresh. Ooh, I've already reset it 3 times. If I press Command S again, I bet I will get the fourth one. Yeah, right? And we're injecting them. And again, okay, so we can have add, right? What about const get users, right? I think. So we want to get all users. Maybe get all users. And we want to have get all users, and we have just await users, user, I think it's find all, as I remember. So let's go to, again, queries, select, yeah, find all. And we will have the same problem that we had with return, await, that we had with, let me just count it out, with the previous, with MySQL, this adapter, that remember that we need to convert to the object. So if I have const users equals get users, and we want to await, and then we have console log users to see all users from database. So save, and I have this. See, again, we have some weird structure of objects, right? Which is not what we want. But here, instead of in MySQL, we can pass parameter to where we have our find all as a argument or parameter to our function. You can pass row and true. Save. And now we have just a nicely formatted array of users, right? Pretty easy. questions on that?
I think it's going to be too many questions.
I mean, I'm open to every single.
Probably we have to like at least start building it so we know, because there's a lot of small questions everywhere.
Yeah, so we have exercises, especially you'll do the same. You'll have exercises today. Okay, so great. We have add users, we have get all users, and let me just go back to my slides. And now I want to create the express. We have pets and users and ID. This is the other thing that I want to show you. So let's create actually two endpoints for users. Get all users and add a new user. So forget about, I mean, I'm writing everything here in one file, but to be honest, you definitely need to create this in different files. So let's say here you might create some folder to, I don't know, SQL. And maybe you'll create like index.js there, and you'll put your, so you don't need MySQL here anymore. Just setup, schema, and these two functions, right? So let's actually try, is it still working? So module exports. I mean, this is a spoiler for last week exercises. So exports, and you passing add users and get all users. So now const get all users, add user, require, and we have SQL index.js. So that should work, I hope. Let's try again. It's not defined. Sequelize. All right, because we have yeah, we probably want to move this. We still want to have sequelize here for it, because we have where is it? All right, we will not testing it here. Okay, yeah, that's fine. We don't need authentication here. We want to have it there. We need to build the structure, think about the structure, but let's forget about this for a second and just get rid of this. So log users. Yeah, right? So we're still getting data and we are able to have it here. Okay, so for this one, we want to have express, right? Again, this is spoiler for previous week, but express is pretty easy. So const app express instance, and now we can create endpoints. So first app.listen 3000, for example, the endpoint, the port that we want to listen, error, and console log. We have list on port 3000. So we don't need to have this now. As you can see, we haven't installed Node. Express, sorry. So npm install express. And we will get our express running So node, yeah, listening port 3000. Beautiful. So now we can create some endpoints. So app.get, because I want to handle get endpoint, and let's say users endpoint, right? And here we have requests and response. So when I'm getting this request to user, and this is get method, what I want to do is to call this function. So this should be async, right? Because const users equals await get all users. So I'm getting the users, all users, and I'm sending them back. Send with JSON stringify users, right? I probably want to send status code 200 if it's successful, right? So I've just created an endpoint with users on localhost 3000, and let's actually test it. To test your endpoints, you don't need to build your front end now. All you need to do is use Postman. So some of you who already was working on the exercises already know it. But if you don't, this is the tool that you need to use for your to test your backend. So here I have some other endpoints, but in my case, I have users, right? So local 3000 users get method. So get request on this URL. So if I send this query, I'm expecting to get all my users from the database, from my MySQL. So let's try. Looks about right. So if I go to raw, pretty, it's not HTML, it's JSON. Looks like I have all my users. Is it look nice? I know that you're overexcited now there. That is why you're muted. Yeah. So pretty easy. Basically, you send in query, you have your Express running, you have an endpoint, and when you get your endpoint, you're getting when you reach this endpoint with get method, you just getting all of them and stringify and send it back. Okay, so let's create another one, app.post, right? Because we want to add another user. So users, and we have post method, where I want to post the user. And let's actually test it, because const, I know that Gargana asked me today about how to handle users. So here, console log, this is what I'm suggesting. You start with a console login request. And let me just go and create another tab. The endpoint should be the same, but I want to change it to post. And when I'm posting in my body, raw JSON, I want to post, so the first name, right? SL. And last name should be, and the age should be 31. Yeah, so I have my record here, right? So I want to delete it, save it. Let me remove a few more records, right? So I have just 2 records here. If I refresh, I have just 2 records. So now, in my code, I'm not storing this to the database. I just want to console log the request that I'm getting from here. So let me send the request. It's loading because I've never sent a response, but we already have our console. So let's scroll And look, where do we have this data? And we're actually looking for body. Response. Because I know that that should be in body. Let's actually just do it. Body. And I want to send response just to terminate this query. Send. I don't know. Good. Right? So if I click, I'm getting good. Beautiful. So my body is undefined. And undefined is because it's promise and we not resolving it. So how we can handle it is with express. And again, when you will work on your exercises, you need to read documentation, but you have app.use. And this is like a middleware that you can do something before you before you get to the point when you need to handle your queries. And I have express.json. This is a function. So it will parse my data every time when I send my query. So let me check that again. As you can see, I just got my body, right? This is my user, which is great. So that means that here I have add user and I can await add user with my request body. So we need to do that, like to make it proper server, we need to add some validation to check the field, the all columns, everything, and handle errors. But we just build in very simple thing just to show you an example that it is working. So what we can do here, we have our add user. So we have just await. We need to return something. We can return what if we are awaiting. And here, I believe that we will get the full table, but let's check that. You probably don't want to get the full table. We want to just await const that, or maybe we can just use try and catch. I'm just thinking like what is a nice way to do it. So if you're not getting any errors, we're sending this user back, right? Otherwise, we response.send error, something like that. We're still not passing errors there, but it doesn't matter for now. Yeah, so what I'm doing, I'm posting, so I'm getting from the body, I'm getting my user, and I'm storing this to the database and sending back that if it's successful, I'm sending back the user that I've added, right? So let's go to the database, refresh. I don't have it. So now if I click send, I actually got the response that it was successful, and if I refresh my database, I have my record. Questions? Any?
Probably too many.
So as you can see, with Express and with SQLize, let's say you write very few lines of code to set up the server to handle queries, and everything is super nice and lean. So you don't need to don't need to write a lot of codes. That is why nobody's working with HTTP. People use Express. People avoid like just MySQL, use some SQLize or something. And your code becomes very nice. So you have just nice endpoints, and you can easily handle data and transfer this from the user. And now, so I'm doing that here in a Postman, right? But if I create a front end with JavaScript, I will create some just regular front end, some index HTML, create some JavaScript, and I can fetch this data from this URL, and I will get this data on my client side in my website. So you can parse this data and render this data on HTML and see the user or all users. So now your backend is working. Yeah. This is very basic. Right. The last thing that I want to show you is, remember these relationships, and here I have pets. So you can get your, let's say I will create here, I will create another table, pets. And here I will have ID, I will have name, which should be varchar, nullable yes, default null, and two should be owner ID, or like, yeah, owner ID. And this owner ID will be my user from in other table. Should be integer. Yeah, let's be nullable, and for example we have default is null. So save, go here. So what kind of users do we have? We have Sam, John, and Asil, right? So let's create a pet for Sam. So ID 1 and name RG. This is my pet, but okay. And the owner ID is 2, I believe, right? Is it 2? No, 4. Sam is 4. So 4. Save. So we have Archibald as a Sam's pet. So to get I want to get the name of the owner by the pet's name, by the basically by the owner ID, right? So I know I have the pet, I have the owner ID, but I want to get the actual name of the owner, like first name and last name. So what I can do is, let me just close my users. So SQL, I want to select users first name and users last name, and let's say pets name from users table. So I need to inner join, and you can read about join in SQL documentation. Inner, I might be wrong actually with some syntax, so I might need to Google something. Need to inner join, and we have pets where pets owner ID equals to users dot ID, something like that, and semicolon in the end. So run query. As you can see, we're getting Sam, Smith, and Archie, right? And we have name. It's not very descriptive, so we can change actually the value of to render it as pet name. So if I run this command, I have 3 columns, so I will get an object with keys and values, first name, last name, and pet name, right? and I'm getting all of them. Because I don't have more, I'm getting only this. But we can specify where the user ID is something specific, or where the so basically you can tailor it based on ID, based on name, etc. But this is how I can get value based on the user ID. But based on the owner, let's say owner or user ID, from one table into the another, within the another. I bet you're confused. I like 100% you're confused. But you don't need to think about that. Again, that is why we use SQLize, because with SQLize you can just read their docs and see how you can handle these such queries and how you can build them. Because for you, you're just tailoring the query here in JavaScript way, and you will get the same response. Behind the scene, SQLize doing just SQL queries. It will actually run the same queries like that. It's just doing that for you. So you don't need to memorize the syntax. You don't need to learn another language, let's say. Questions on that one?
Are there any extra security features with Express which should be included in queries?
Yeah, so basically authentication, but we will talk about that later on the course. Yeah, you need to authorize or unauthorize users. So you will basically create like middlewares. So when somebody is sending you a post request, this person is supposed to have an access, and there are a few ways to handle this check. Does the user has an access? You can pass unique key, you can take something from cookies, etc. So quite a few ways, and we will talk about that later. But for now, you don't need to think about that. Just you need to learn how to transfer data from user to server and from server to user. Okay. If you don't have any other questions, we
yep. Also, I think the as far as the second cohort is concerned, we haven't done any promises and synchronize.
Right, that's my bad. Right.
Yeah.
Sorry. I haven't thought about that. Yeah, because you'll have promises and async on the next module.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, in the next module, JavaScript part 2.
Yeah.
My bad. Okay, if you want, I can organize some quick lesson on Saturday evening and talk about like basic stuff, and we will talk in details on the next module, but we will just cover what you need to know for these exercises and for this module.
Saturday, sorry, I won't be available Saturday.
Let's talk about what day will work for everyone,
yeah.
And I will do that, because yeah, this is my bad. We definitely need to shift this module after the JavaScript part 2.
Yeah, but Friday or Sunday, and the others can tell.
I mean, yeah. So I'll post a message in our Slack now with days, and you'll just leave thumb which day works for you, and if you few days works for you, leave a few thumbs, and yeah, and I will we will choose in this way.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Sorry for that. Yeah, I don't know how what I was thinking. I mean, I know async, so it's fine.
Yeah, and there was like if you go back to your code, there's also like one thingy, await. So is that would have to do Express or have to do with the?
No, this is JavaScript. Async await. This is JavaScript. This is how you handling basically asynchronous code.
Oh, so it has to do with the asynchronous.
Yeah, yeah, but again, we will cover that on the next module. Sorry about that, and I will in that quick lesson I will talk about just async event and await, how to work with them, and later we will talk about other options, how we normally what kind of options basically you have with JavaScript and asynchronous code.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, thank you for your time. And next, so on Thursday, we will talk about MySQL. Sorry, not MySQL. About MongoDB, and we will have more time to write. Basically, we'll have during the lesson we'll build some API and server with MongoDB, and from Thursday we will use Mongo for all your projects. Yep. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for today, and see you on Thursday.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye bye.